welcome to the first episode of the Community Healthcast. Today we have Victoria here. Victoria is a doula and she's going to become a midwife soon. And she was actually my doula when I was pregnant with my son. Hi, Victoria. How are you today?
Hi, love. I'm great. How are you? Thank you for
I'm
having me.
very good. Very good to have you here. So I prepared just few questions for you. You just dig into pregnancy, labor, postpartum, and your point of view on all of that. So first, I wanted to ask you to share with us a little bit your story and what made you want to become a doula and now a midwife.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. My name is Victoria. I've been a doula for about 9 years now and almost a midwife, like Aurora said. And it's been an honor to, be in that space with so many women. My path as a doula became or started through my own birth. I had an amazing home birth, which was incredibly empowering and activating. Like it activated so much inside of me, to be able to birth my beautiful baby and in the comfort of my own home with I felt like in charge of that process, and being in charge in that moment empowered me. And then I started having dreams where I was attending births, and I took that as a calling. I took that as a direction, and so I went with it. A little bit before that, I went to Mexico to pray about devoting myself to something that had like a higher purpose and that was in alignment with my desires to live in a wholesome, connected way. And then my son came, and then through my son came this calling to attend to women. And I feel like birth work is very much like a service for me, of more than just being a career. It's like a calling, it's a purpose, it's a offering to be of service to humanity, to families.
That's good. I mean, you really have to be passionate about birth, and I mean, and how can you not be passionate about babies, like that's for sure. So, but yeah, that's great. And so can you tell us what is the difference between the care you receive from like a regular OBGYN and a midwife and a doula?
Yes. I believe the most fundamental difference between an OB and a midwife is that midwives are going to look at women as like the ultimate authority over their birth and as an active participant in their pregnancy. And so with midwifery care, most of the time you're going to be given the opportunity to be in charge of making decisions over your birth. So you will be presented with options, and then we will ask you like, is this something you want or is this something you don't want? And then we will give you the information to make that decision. But you are ultimately making the decisions over yourself, over your body, over your baby. And yeah, in essence, we're really doing our best to protect that relationship between the mother and the baby, and the care is personalized to the mother so that it's coherent to her values, to her ways of life, and to her desires. And then I believe that you can also build that type of relationship with an OBGYN, but it's just a little bit different because there's the continuity of care when you're seeing a midwife. It's you're building a relationship. Um, you have more time with them to really get to know your choices.
Yes, because I remember with my midwife, I was actually seeing her, I think not for the first month, but I think after 5 months, something like that, I was seeing her every month. When with an OBGYN, it's kind of like not the same thing. You see them, what, when you do an ultrasound and that's it?
Well, ideally, you're still seeing your OBGYN, right? Like in early pregnancy, you're going every month, and then you're going every 2 weeks, and then you're going every 1 week. But the visits are different. You're usually spending 30, 45 minutes outside in the waiting room, 15 minutes actually with your OB. The questions typically are rushed. I don't want to like assume that all OBs are this way, but from the stories that I have heard, you get very little time actually sitting down with your provider to really ask the questions. A lot of the times, if you're pushing back on their recommendations, you're going to get, eye rolls, or you're going to be sort of ignored, or ridiculed. Not all, but most. And then, so it really makes it hard for a woman to feel like she is an active participant of her care. You're being told what you're going to do, and if you don't want to do it, um, then it's kind of a nuisance, you know? Whereas in
Yes,
midwifery
because
care,
yeah, that's something that I noticed. I mean, obviously I never been to an OBGYN while I was pregnant, but for what I heard from my friend and my family, when you go there, they are just focused basically on doing an exam, an ultrasound, and then, just procedure, but they don't really take the time of talking to you about how labor is going to happen, all of those concerns that you can have. They are much more medically oriented, if I can say that, instead of focusing on the person itself.
yes, I would agree, absolutely. And so I believe that in midwifery care, we always try to redirect the energy, the power, and the decision making back to the mother. And this makes her an active and responsible participant over her own care. And then this empowers them, this like gives them the knowing that they can take care of themselves, their families, you know, and it really creates a very empowered, competent, secure mother. And that's going to translate, you know, to the rest of her maternity. And then that's going to make a really strong mother and a really strong family and a really strong community. And it's really not us giving the mother the power. The power was always theirs. We're just like redirecting it back to them, which I believe it's really missing in obstetrical care.
Yes, absolutely. Because I remember when I got pregnant, I already knew that I wanted to have my son at home, but you still have uncertainties, you are scared and everything. And having you reminding me that, I was capable of doing that and, pushing me in that direction was what gave me confidence that I was going to be able to have my son at home versus going to an OBGYN where you tell them, okay, I'm going to have my baby at home. And they are like, whoa. Whoa, okay. Let's talk about that for a few minutes because
Yeah,
it's, not something that they encourage you to do.
exactly. And even down to the terminology that we use, right? Like when you're getting care from a midwife, we like to say client because we don't see you as somebody that is sick, you
Yes,
know? And then when you receive patient from an OB, I mean, care from an OB, they're referring to you as a patient.
absolutely.
And so even bringing it down to those really small things, I think we're always like doing our best to rewrite the narrative of pregnancy. Like this is a healthy, vibrant woman who is not sick. And so how do we like normalize that narrative, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Because that's also something that you see. Why should you have your baby in a hospital when you're actually not sick? You are pregnant. And I don't mean that when there is emergency because I actually ended up having my baby in a hospital, but you are not sick and if there is no emergency you should be able to have your baby at home, like, or if you are not comfortable about home, maybe you can go to a birthing center, but it shouldn't be an hospital. If like everything went well during your pregnancy and then you are managing your labor perfectly and everything is smooth, then you should be able to have your baby at home, and that should be the first choice for no intervention and just being able to have your baby the way you want to have your baby.
Absolutely. Yes.
Is there any course or classes that you recommend for mom that are looking to have their baby at home or even the baby at the hospital, is that can prepare them and empower them to be able to have their baby at home?
Yes. I would say first would be to try to find your local birth centers and midwives and birth centers. And if you can find an in-person community class, that's always amazing because then you get to meet other parents, you get to listen to their testimonies, listen to their questions, and like this, it's like a really complete class. But if that's not available to you, if there's just no local birth classes, there's an Instagram course called Bad Ass Mother Birther. She's a little vulgar, but has amazing information. Ayla Cuenca, Uncovering Birth, is another great birth worker who has an online offering that's amazing. Natural Mama, which is a really well known internet resource page for, like alternative approaches to motherhood. She has
Yes,
a
I,
good
I
for
I bought her book when I was pregnant, and I did her birthing class too, and it was very nice. I remember that we watched all the classes with my husband, and it was very empowering. But I took another one, and I think the one that for me was the best was actually Pain-Free Birth. Did you hear about her?
I have her on Instagram, but I haven't heard about the class.
Yeah, so the class are just amazing, and like she goes deep into the power that you have and how you can have your baby at home. I didn't take any classes, like local classes or everything. I just did everything online because I thought that, like with the support that I had from you and the classes that I was taking online, everything was enough. And it actually was, like I learned so much from this course. It was just amazing.
Amazing.
Is there
I'll
any?
check that out and recommend it.
Yes, it's a really a good one. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the birth plan. So the importance of having a birth plan, not just because even if you like, you're going to have your baby at home, something can come out. And like for me, for example, I ended up having my son in the hospital. I had a birth plan, but I left it at home. I hadn't prepared a bag with my birth plan, like nothing was ready. I wanted to have my baby at home, no intervention, but that I ended up in the hospital, and then I didn't have my birth plan with me. I think I was tired. I was in pain, and I ended up saying yes for Pitocin because the OBGYN told me, okay, listen, I'm going to agree to everything that you say, because I told him I want to delay cord clamping, no intervention, nobody touches my son. And he said, I'm going to say yes to all of that, but you're going to have to agree with me to get Pitocin. And I think it's because I was just so tired and confused and everything. I said yes. So I ended up having Pitocin versus having my birth plan with me, everything written on it. You just give it to them and that's it. That's just what I want. So can you tell us a little bit about that, about the importance of that?
Yes. So the birth plan, I always say it's a great exercise, mainly for the family. Um, After, of course, taking your birth classes and being aware and really having the conviction of what you want to put in there, you sit down and it's like a vision board. You make a vision board at the beginning of the year or whenever you make it. The birth plan is like a vision board for your birth. It's a blueprint and it's a foundation. And sometimes it's not to the T of what it says there, but that's okay because we know that birth is unpredictable. We know that things happen, but it's an amazing exercise for the first for the family to really be sure of what they want, what they don't want, and then for the birth team, so the doula, the midwife, and then if anything starts to deviate outside of the birth plan, it's a good like anchor, right? Like, okay, we understand that you're maybe contemplating this now, but let's anchor down. Let's remember what you wanted when you were sure, when you weren't scared, when you weren't in pain. Because, like you said, sometimes a lot starts to happen at a birth, and things start to not make sense, and we deviate from the birth plan, and then um, you're in pain or you're tired, and it's kind of hard to remember your convictions when you're in that state of mind. But if you took the time and you did the practice and you created the birth plan, we can always circle back to that, come back to that anchor and say, hey, remember what your desires were when you were in a clear state of mind, when you were well rested, when you were not in pain. Let's remember what you chose.
Mhm.
And then, of course, sometimes, again, you're going to deviate outside of that. And so, how do we repair that experience? Like, how do we heal from having to deviate from our vision? But it's super important to have that birth plan. Even if you're birthing with a midwife, I always say, like, I'm studying to be a midwife, and midwives are not inherently perfect, right?
Yes.
Like you might still need your birth plan at home, even if she says like, oh, I don't need that. Like, that's how I practice anyways. Like, still make your birth plan because this is more for yourself so that you are clear on what you want and then nobody can easily sway you from it. So it's a really good exercise for a blueprint and foundation of the things that you want at your birth.
Yeah, and I think like you should also have your partner ready for that, because if you think about what happened to me, being so tired, and Pitocin was, epidural was also the last thing that I wanted. But at that point, I was in so much pain that I took the epidural. But Pitocin was really something that I didn't want, just because, again, I was so tired and I was in so much pain. I remember when the OBGYN said that, I said, yes, sure, like it was nothing. And I think that if I had my husband more prepared for that, him knowing more of the birth plan and everything, it would have been the one fighting, saying like, hey, no, remember you say no Pitocin, so let's stick to that because this is not necessary. Unless it's necessary, we're going to do it. But if it's not, then we are not going to do it. That's what I think. That's how important it is to be prepared, and having also your husband prepared to that, because he's the one at the end of the day in the room with you, fighting for what you want and for what you don't want.
Yes, very important. That's why I say it's really an exercise between the mother and the husband. Like, and it's all like, as a doula, I always try to emphasize the importance of that intimacy and that dyad of the mom and the dad being both active participants, because yes, a lot of the times in the hospitals they will look at the doula and just ignore her, and like,
Yeah.
we could be doing our best, but if the husband's like, okay, yeah, go, babe, you should do it, which it wasn't the case, with you guys, but very important for the husband to be on board with the birth plan, to be an active participant, to read it, to be super, like, to know what's going on there.
Yeah. And I think for us, we were so sure that we were going to have our son at home that we kind of forgot about the rest, that we could actually end up in the hospital. So it was, we had the birth plan, but we know what's going to happen. The birth plan is here, but we are not going to use it because we're going to have our son at home. So then everything changes and you rush to the hospital and suddenly you forget everything. That is one of the things I should have done better, just knowing my birth plan better and prepare myself just in case something happened and I will actually end up in the hospital giving birth to my son there instead of at home. So for the mom that want to have their baby at home but are scared and still unsure if they want to do it or not, what can you tell them to help them make a decision?
Yes. Well, I think circling back to having a plan, right? Like, a lot of the times fear come from just not having enough information. Most fears, right? Like,
Mhm.
we just don't know enough. So I would say, on a practical level, really trying to identify the fears and dissect them. Like, what exactly about home birth scares you? Is it like the whole thing, like just the thought of home birth that scares you? Or is it specific scenarios, bleeding, short of dystocia, maybe different things? Like, really taking your time to dissect it, identify it, and try to make a plan,
Yeah.
Like, if home birth scares you as a whole, maybe home birth is not the safest place for you, and that's okay. You can still
Yeah.
you can still have an incredible hospital birth. But most of the times, what I've noticed is that these fears are just things that we've picked up along the way, from the culture of viewing pregnancy as like a medical event rather than a normal physiological life process. And so we pick up all these fears surrounding birth that truly don't belong to us. And that when we make a plan, choose to trust and strategize, actually we neutralize those fears and they're not that big anymore. And an elder of mine once said, fear can either move you or paralyze you. So if you are truly being called to have a home birth, I think a certain level of fear is like normal and almost healthy to a certain extent, because it is a rite of passage. And most rites of passage come with a certain amount of like fear, nervousness. It's just like a knowing that you're about to give yourself to something really big and really outside of yourself, and that you're gonna have to give up control over your body, and that can be a little scary sometimes. So how do we neutralize those fears? How do we make a plan and, yeah, become active participants over our birth? And instead of like hiding the fears, we really just try to normalize them. So if your fear, for example, is like bleeding, that might mean talking to your provider if you have a midwife, or if you're not yet working with one, you can always make a list of all these things that scare you and talk to a birth worker that can help you, that can help ease fears, you know? And that's, yeah, I think those are great ways that you can maybe try to neutralize those fears.
When I got pregnant, I just knew I wanted to have my son at home and I wanted to have minimal intervention. Honestly, I was scared of being in pain, but I think that it's most of the mom because we've been portrayed birth being complicated and terrible. And like in the movies, we see those women going when they are
Yeah.
giving birth. And I'm not saying that this is not painful, but your body was meant to do that. There is even something beautiful about this pain is because you know that your baby is coming and your body was made for that.
Like you said, I think if the fear is simply the pain, it's like rewriting those narratives of like, this is not a medical event. This is a normal physiological bodily process, and it's meant to empower you, you know, and um, yeah, talking to women who have had similar birth experiences that you're desiring, and asking questions and just trying to rewrite the narrative of pain and suffering. Like, pain doesn't always equal suffering, right? So using your pregnancy to prepare for
Yeah, and you know, it's true what they say that you forget about the pain. In a blink of an eye, you see your baby and then you forget everything. You forget the pain and everything. If that was not the case, women will not keep to have baby. They will have one and say, okay, that's it, I'm done. I don't want to go through that again. For me, I just have one. But if tomorrow I have a second one, I know that I want to have it at home. You know, like my son's birth was not what we had planned, and even if that was complicated and there was pain, I know that tomorrow if I have a second one, I'm gonna have it at home. My husband doesn't agree with that. For him, like, if we have a second one, it's gonna be in a hospital. But for me, no,
so
yeah.
yeah, even that is a perfect example, right? Like sometimes we pick up fears along the way that didn't even belong to us in the first place, right? Like your husband was fully on board with the home birth the first time, but then something in his life course happened where now he has a fear towards it. But if you just identify it, if you make a plan for it, if you know, if you get more information about it, then it's gonna balance out the experience for him, and then he'll feel a little safer in at home with you, you know. And so
Yes.
there's so much work there. Every pregnancy really allows us to refine our own sense of self, you know, and like really work on ourselves. And this is an invitation that natural birth brings to us, because like you said, it's very easy to just hand it all over to someone else, but that's because we're not ready to do the deep work that pregnancy, birth, and postpartum really can be if we allow them to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you explain to us when you have your baby at home, what is the difference of having your baby at home and having your baby in a hospital? What are you allowed to do, like the freedom that you have versus what you cannot do in a hospital?
Yeah. So first, of course, there's the fact that you're like in your own safe environment, that you are accustomed to, and with the scents that you're accustomed to, the sights, you know, the lighting that you like. And so birth is very physiological, like very physical, very spiritual, very physiological. It depends on communication of hormones. And when you're home, that communication of hormones is just more likely to occur smoothly, right? Without any stalls, without any pauses, because you're safe and you're home. And so, and your body knows that. And so you're more free to progress. Of course, you don't have to go anywhere. You're in your own clothing, you're in your own environment. You can eat as you wish, you can move as you desire, you can sleep, rest, you can go on walks, you can take baths, showers. Like, you pretty much have the freedom to do whatever you desire to do, to birth your baby. And the midwife will follow your lead. Same with like when it's time to have your baby. You can be in whatever position you want. You can start pushing, stop pushing. Nobody's going to be on a time clock. Nobody's going to be coming in and out do vaginal exams, and everything we do, from the most basic, from assessing your baby's heart, we're always going to ask, can we do this? Can we do that? And sometimes it might be a little redundant, but we always like to make sure that you're okay with it, you know? And we always give you a reasoning why we're doing it too. So it's very stubborn. You have a lot of power over what you want to do, a lot of freedom, you know?
That's exactly the feeling that I had when I was home. It feels cozy, it's familiar, and you are not scared. There is this level of comfort when you are at home that is very different than in a hospital because you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel cozy. It's very medical.
Yes. And so, midwives are still doing the recommended like vital checks. So they're still checking in on the mom and the baby. It's just a more humane, less intervention like minded approach, right? Like we're not constantly monitoring the baby, we're monitoring the baby as per the recommended guidelines, and this allows just for a natural progression of labor without so many stallings. Like it's like I know that this comparison is always made, but if you're making love to someone and people are walking in and out, it's gonna stop. You're gonna feel like interrupted. You're not gonna feel as free to go forward. It's the same with birth.
Absolutely. I remember like being in my bubble and feeling so at peace versus in the hospital where you have people, like you said, coming in and out. It's a very different experience. But when you don't have a choice, when there is a medical
Of course.
emergency, of course, there is no question about that. But if you have the opportunity to have your baby at home, that's the most beautiful experience that you can have.
Yeah.
So, can you explain to us a little bit about the care that you receive postpartum from a doula and a midwife versus just a regular OB?
Yeah. So every doula, every midwife is a little different. Um, but typically with a doula and a midwife, we're coming to your home and we're doing care in the comfort of your own home again, right? So we're not expecting you to leave and come back anywhere. I mean, a lot of women, I know our bodies are healing, maybe we got sutures. So having to leave your home in those first couple weeks, it's a whole outing. And so we believe that keeping the mother and the baby home in the first 6 weeks is very important to the long-term health of both the mom and the baby because it prioritizes comfort, bonding, breastfeeding. And so we come to the home. Typically the midwife will do like a 24-hour check and then one like at 5 days and then 10 days, 2 weeks, 6 weeks. And in this way, we're making sure that she's feeling okay and we're checking in on her emotional state of being too. I feel like that's very just like minimized in an obstetrical model of care. They might do like a survey where they ask you some questions about your emotions, but that's about it. And in midwifery care, we're making sure that the mother is good emotionally as well. We might offer lactation support. Um, and myself, I studied with traditional midwives, so I do a lot of hands on things like um, belly binding and yoni steaming, and some maybe bring you some food. I would say it's a more holistic postpartum approach where we're not just looking at the physical state of the woman, right? We're not just like, are you bleeding? How's your stitches? Are your nipples cracked? No, no, no. No, you're okay. We're really trying to like, how are you really? We understand that the first 40 days are like a whole lifetime. So we're making sure that we're checking consistently on the mother, how she's doing. We can be offering emotional support. We can offer support to the family, whoever's present, newborn care. I feel it's a very comprehensive approach that we take when we're coming to your home.
Mhm.
And in obstetrical model of care, like I said, I think you're also doing a first 24-hour visit. You're already in the hospital, so your doctor might step in for 10 minutes to shake your hand and see how ask how your vagina is doing. They probably won't even look at it unless you ask them in the whole 6 weeks. um I believe it's very surface. And I think that's why we see a lot of postpartum depression, because a lot of things are like falling between the cracks. A lot of things are missed because it's such a short visit, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I think there is one thing that is obvious in this society is that as soon as the mom has given birth to the baby, then the focus is not on the mom anymore. It's only on the baby. And we forget totally about the mom when we should actually focus more on the mom than the baby, because the baby was born, the baby is healthy, everything is fine for the baby. When actually the mom went to a really hard time and we should focus more on her. It's just, like moms are not taken care of after they give birth to babies in this society.
Yes.
They are suddenly with a new baby and they have to learn everything if it's the first one, and nobody is there to help them. I'm from France, so all my family is in France. It was just me and my husband here. And like one thing that I didn't have was being supported by anyone around me. And it feels that this whole postpartum period was like so complicated for me to manage, because like I said, suddenly you have a baby to take care of and you get scared now because you have this little human here that depends on you and you don't know how to take care of him, and you are tired, and then your hormones are all over the place. And this is why like having you around was a blessing, because if you are by yourself and you don't have a village around you, having a doula around you can really change things, because they are really going to focus on you and not only on the baby.
Yes. Yes. And like you said, I feel like if in the society we have forgotten to take care of the mothers, and that's why we see so much disbalance in like the family unit, because this postpartum period is just forgotten and like neglected. And if we just focus on the mom, the baby's going to be well. Like
Yes,
if the mom is well, the baby's going to be well, you
absolutely.
know? And so how can we redirect the energy? How do we take better care of the mothers in
Mhm.
postpartum? I think there's still a missing link even in midwifery care, I think that we're doing better. Um, but it's so important. Postpartum care is so important.
Yes, absolutely. And even for the dads too, because we tend to forget, okay, they didn't go through, the whole labor and everything, but mom has 9 months to be prepared to be a mom. And we became moms as soon as we know we are pregnant. But for the dad, is one day to another, boom, they become dads. I remember my husband having like a hard time adjusting because, like I say, one day from another, he became a dad.
Yes.
And that's also the good thing with a doula and a midwife. They are actually taking time to also, talk to the dad and see how he's doing. Like it's a very different care. It's very caring for the
Yes.
whole family.
Yes. Absolutely.
The last question that I wanted to ask you is, can you tell us like the craziest birthing story that you had, or the most beautiful one, something that really stayed with you that you're gonna remember even in 50 years?
I honestly, they're all so beautiful. And I honestly don't have just one, honestly, at this moment, that
Okay.
really sticks out to me because I've seen so much. And, I've had women birth in their yards, like
Wow.
next to flowers. And, um, yeah, they ended up naming the baby after the flower patch that she was born next to.
Really?
That was beautiful. Um, I think the births that really stand out to me are the births of like my really close longtime friends, you know? And then I get to see their babies be born, and then I get to see them grow up, and we're so close. And also the healing births, like births that come after trauma or a C-section or like loss. Those are just incredible. Always really humbling. But I know, I'm sorry, I don't have a big story for you.
No, but that's okay. That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for
Oh, of
sharing
course.
all of that with us. It was very nice to have you here. And then I can't wait to see you when I'm coming back in Miami.
Yes, that would be such a gift.
Yes,
Thank you for having me.
absolutely. It was a pleasure. Bye, Victoria.
Bye.
Bye.